thank you so much for joining us, both those of you here at the Anglo-Omani Society premises and those of you that are joining us online. We're very happy to be having a hybrid lecture today and to look at the role of oil and gas companies in driving corporate social responsibility in developing economies. This is a topic we haven't explored in quite this way before, although we've had a number of events that have looked both at energy and that Dr. Amor started out his connection to the Anglo-Omani Society as a student member. So we're very happy to see that trajectory of somebody starting as a student and coming back to us as a leader in his field. It's really wonderful to have you with us today. We will, as usual, start with a presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity for an interactive discussion with all of you. So if you do have questions and comments, we look forward to hearing them after this initial presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Amor.
Thank you very much for accepting me to be here with you today. It's always a privilege and an honor to be among colleagues and friends of Oman. And I think no better place than the Anglo-Omani Society to be in for such an engagement process. And I'd like to say it's an engagement because I'm sure an amateur to all of you who've been in the field, who've been in Oman. We've seen Oman developing over the years. And so what I'm going to say, most of it maybe is not new to many of you. However, we know there's a hybrid system, so some of these statements I share just for those audience who might be not familiar with Oman. And although the title goes to say, maybe go right? I think maybe if you, yeah, the video is only 2 minutes. Yeah. Until the so okay. So this video we thought will start to cracks and get the comfort of being together. Starting with this video, it's one of those initiatives which I might refer to later on when I talk about our corporate social responsibility and our contribution to sustainability at a wider perspective. It's a village which is within very close proximity to our plant in Sur, in Oman. And it's a village which to us is like, I don't want to give away the, well, it's said maybe some of you have seen the movie or the video, but it's one of those areas that are so attached to because it's unique in Oman to see a small place somewhere in a mountainous area with a waterfall running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, sorry. So we thought it was, and we recently, part of our social investment program, we felt we will develop this village and turn it to be a sustainable village for years to come. Basically, the objective is because we realize that village is start losing its basic local content. The people who live there for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, and they start to migrate to the main city looking for a new way of life. And unfortunately, like many villages in Oman, get abandoned because people moved on for different reasons. They tend to be occupied by laborers who might not appreciative to that local content and that historical values and culture and so on and so forth. So we felt maybe to intervene and reinstate that village and actually preserve it for the future generation to enjoy it as much as we do today. So I'll leave you with a couple of minutes just for the video and then we'll go to the presentation. Actually, if somebody wants to know more about the village, my colleague Mohammed Matani, he is the project champion, and he's with us today. He's a senior manager about communication and community relations. One of our licensed to operate sort of advocates and champion there in the whole community where we are hosted. So basically, so as I said, the title might be much broader than what it is, but I still felt that we should maybe start at that high level and maybe as we process down, we might go a bit into the details of it. And also, the objective is to have a feeling that, or at least some of the discussion with many people who might have a perspective of oil and gas as being on the other side of the spectrum, not always as bad as sometimes get portrayed by certain media. So I thought today also the objective is to share with you some of our experience. We as a company in the sorry. So okay. So do I go into it? So basically, this is not an order. Maybe I might stick to knowing myself, but just how it is. So if I don't go straight, we feel okay. I think you're setting out of your norms, but so the thought I will. It's a context. It's in Oman, so basically what I'm going to talk about. However, sometime I might go a generic, but definitely we'll zoom back to talk about Oman because that's where my knowledge majority is. You see the picture on the side is our Sur. It's a village near a village called Al-Had. Al-Had is a very ancient village. We're also doing part of our data research and definitely doing a lot of Al-Had to bring it back again to reserve it for the future generation the way we like to be. I enjoy it as much as we enjoy it today. So I'll just try to go. Yeah, okay. So most of you know Oman. Oman from not only from geographical location as one of those countries historically known to connect west to the east. It's been a long-lasting relationship with the United Kingdom, and it's also been known. Both countries are seafarers, and both countries are traded throughout the years. And that relationship, I'm glad to say, is being continued by the succession of the monarch in Oman, and that's his Majid Sultan Haytham now is taking this to a new dimension in the interest of the Omani and the sort of relationship. And the economy of Oman, basically, most of it highly depends on hydrocarbon. But historically, Oman also is being known as I said, a country who traded with many countries across the world, including other parts as part of China, and there is history proven today. And also before with Egyptian and the Pharaoh, they've been when Frankenstein was mostly the project of the season, and then dates and other parts during the Said bin Sultan. Actually, Oman extended that even to a much bigger to East Africa, and most of the exchange of trade between the East Africa and Asia was actually brought by the Omanis in the plantation of other aspects, which would be the Silk Road was there. So I think Oman has a rich history, a very sound economical background. As all nations, sometimes we go into the cycle because of the circumstances, but we've been sustaining. So the political systems there, the stability of the political system, which attracts many to Oman. And I think that's been sustained, and the smooth succession of the late Majid Sultan Qaboos and Haytham took over. I think that assurance being given not to the Omani only, but to the world, the same success, the same attribute to Oman's success over the years going to be continued. And we've seen that even we've gone back farther when it comes to financial and economical fiscal aspect, with Oman seeing a better recovery. So there is oil and gas still the main controversy, but also none of oil and gas in the future is taken. We heard recently the hydrogen is being renewable energy. So actually Oman progressing as we go with the rest of the world when it comes to how we actually meeting the growth which is in the industry, like the non-oil and hydrocarbons, of course. So some of the pictures you notice, some of you know, but I can actually reflect the Omani sort of historical heritage when it comes to this process. Okay, so some of you, as me, was very attached. I guess a couple of days ago, I was elected as the president of the Anglo-Omani Environment Society. So if I'm sometime in my discussions slightly biased toward the environment, please forgive me, because I can't change my heart. It's with the natural beauty of Oman, and I really love to protect that. So the Oman natural history is very rich, and most of you who associate yourself with Oman and seen some presentation and talks being done in this room and some other where it reflect on Oman natural beauty. It's really something which I would love, and I'm sure the future generation would love to maintain the way it is. So hydrocarbon, would it impact that, or that? That's a discussion. So again, the other one is when we talk about Oman, I don't know where to point, but I'm just interested. So again, the Oman historical perspective, when later on, why I'm sharing this, because it's one of our social investment and program we do is going to tally to this, to reserve this to the future generation to enjoy it as well. And this is the picture on the top is actually the Khalhat Bibi Mariam Code. It is a massive area. It's actually extended even. It's a huge on the coastal area, and history goes basically being bombarded at the different phases by natural calamities like earthquake, and also by the Portuguese at a given time, unfortunately. So, what is left now? We're actually putting a lot of working with the concerned ministry to putting a big. It's already with a lot of work initially, but now we're actually putting like a visiting center, so people go and they get before I stood here. We're talking about virtual reality and augmented reality, and one of them that we'll be putting here how to take people to a journey in history to really appreciate what that village was looked like in the old days. Again, the maritime in Oman is one of the richest, and I think one of connected Oman to all across the universe. So we again, in sort of the village, we also work a lot with that aspect, and we have a small business, and now we're even working on a bigger project. Actually, recently, if you follow Oman, there was a competition run by His Highness Sayyid Al-Arab, where they actually designing a museum. It's going to be to reflect on the maritime rich history of Oman, and we associated with that too. So they are more into that. So the historical perspective of Oman is really rich and all the way for different era of Oman history. Okay, the culture part again being a given time an empire from the north of the Gulf all the way to the East Africa brought a lot of diversity into the Omani culture. And a lot of programs we do in oil and gas, still we want to retain that as much as possible. With all the modernity that goes with it, but how can we retain this Omani rich culture and be it in all aspects of that spectrum of cultural activities? And always we had this program. Just before we came here, we had a very interesting one-week program where it's actually reflecting the entire maritime culture, which Oman as a melting pot for many cultures, be it the Asian part or the African part of it, or the native, the Arabian aspect of it. So again, there's a lot of work we do on that. I think the economic diversity, as I said, Oman evolved as many countries, and we have not, like some countries, just stuck in the past. Now we evolved. And so dates and all the other things like frankincense and all aspects, they were the main commodity for trade. As we evolve, oil and gas become again the 70s, the 60s, 70s, until still now it's a major contributor to the national economy. but also we are looking future-wise. So when we talk about the winds and the hydrogen and everything, this is mostly a high sort of very wide spectrum of the sustainability perspective, but sometimes CSR as it's maybe short corporate, but sustainability is much wider, but actually it's all around the definition, what it is. Since the 1987, the first definition came up, it's all anchored around how can we serve what we have today for the future generations. So that aspect of sustaining what we have and keeping that balance, because we can't be naive, that's always there. For every modernization, there will be a challenge. But how to create that balance? And I think having the millennium goals, having the 17 goals, it's all linked to this basically about center of human, how can we develop ourselves. I always have a challenge when people talk to me, the universe is going to disappear or the earth going to disappear. I found it rather very challenging because the dinosaurs disappeared, the earth was there. And I think we're not going to be more stronger than the dinosaurs. So we might disappear, but not earth. Earth will stay there. So I think what we have to worry, we as humans, us ourselves. I think, and unfortunately, we don't do anything. Nothing, then we might actually face our own distinction because we've been arrogant. So it's the word that I've said somebody. But I think when looking at sustainability, that sort of notion, how can we create that balance between our economical drive, because humanity, prosperity of humanity cannot be done without, since Adam Smith said it long back, of course, corporate they maybe make only value for the shareholder, but I think that term now shifted to the stakeholders more than the shareholders. The shareholders are maybe making the money as well, but how can we create that? That's all the stakeholder spectrum is being actually maintained throughout those. And I think that's only when you think holistically about sustainability and those interfaces between the environment. You can't be just naive thinking, I'm going to do this. But how can you actually overlap this between the social, economics, between the environment, social, and so on and so forth. And those areas of commonality, I think sustainability normally addresses, where some others might be taken into silos. And I think once the trend is looked for, which is unfortunately why failing in some areas, they're taking it very vertical. And I think for sustainability to succeed, you have to take it horizontally. So everybody you have to walk away from this siloed mentality. And I think I come from a community which is basically a farming community. But when I see how it was, we've never been individualistic in our way. We've always been a more community. So when we go for the harvest, for example, going back in those years, we collectively as a community, we harvest together, we do a lot of things we do together. And unfortunately, this individual mindset is evolved as the capital mind system start to drive the individualistic approach, not the common approach. I think sustainability wants us to go back so that we have something for the common, not something for the individual only. It's not wrong that you grow your wealth and do everything, but you need to grow sustainably. Yeah, it's not just to be selfish to yourself. And that be it in your consumption, be it in whatever you do, is you have to do it through the mindset. And it is those areas where, be it social justice, be it environmental justice, be it whatever, it's just hard to have that. And I think sometimes we need technology, we need development, because that will be the enabler to have to sustain that. So sustainability is much wider, and we'll talk about it in different, maybe later on, because I'm conscious of time. And but it's a topic of discussion. And why we need it, I think it's all, if you believe scientists, which I do, they're telling us if we do nothing within the next decade, then we might be. And they're not asking us a lot. Actually, they often to go back to the pre-industrial age and say, okay, can we sustain the temperature? Not to. And when I reflect personally in my own home community, we never had cycling. I mean, I'm 50 plus. And I'm not giving, I know somebody said I was here in the 80s, but I'm not giving my age away, but for good reason. Sorry for not my, we never had cycling until recently when we had boom, and then it's Farmers Day. We had 4 to 5 cents. And it's very devastating. I've been in 2 of them, and in middle of 2 of them, because one went to Salalah, one to Salalah. But at least the one in Sur, I was in 2 of them. And it's not a place to be in. and the destruction which is after that is huge. But I think the reality of climate change is imminent, it's coming now. It's not a matter of when, it's just how big it will be. And I think we'll face it soon. Again, it goes about in everything else what we do. And unless we are collectively work together, as I said, walk away from the silo mindset to be in the interest of the common. And I think everything, be it in science, and I think also say science or the research will say that sustainable business is actually good business and it could make good money as well. So it's not naive to think it's a loss. Yeah. And I think if we want to, this again goes with the same mindset. How does it relate to the business? Exactly the same thing. Because we have to connect society, and making money is a good thing. I think the shareholders would like us to make money, but they want us to make that money ethically. And as long as that being done ethically, being also conscious about the environment and the impact on the environment and the social impact. And we've seen how climate change has been changing lives. We've seen the pandemic, for example, which is maybe not a climate change, but how can climate, where the side of the mindset of the pandemic felt to be a failure, where you cannot be locking yourself and looking after yourself, but you cannot look. And I think mobility around the globe has proven to us that somebody sneezes in China, you're likely to get the cold here in England or wherever else you are. So you cannot say it's not anymore. It's a country birthday. It's a global, and that's what the climate affair is about. Climate is cross-border as well. So and I think it's also statistics. I know say companies will create sustainability and CSR from a corporate perspective into a serious they could actually make of business. So financial, for those I'm sure I'm an alien to finance because I'm an engineer, my first degree. So if I see from Oman LNG, for example, in the brand issue, when we had during different times and the discussion always went Oman LNG brand was protected because of the credit rating we created in the society. Because the society knew we care for them, and during good time and bad time, they always also go with the staff. Staff protected that Arab Spring and so on and so forth, where everybody get excited and they said no, because we know this company cares for us. And for example, just during cyclone, where of course we had to do it safely as well. But during cyclone, we stayed 4 days inside the plant, because we want to recover that land as soon as the cyclone is down. And we did it with all purely 100% Omanis as well. And this is a capacity we built over the years, from being school leaders to being a town engineer and technical. Currently, our leadership, the entire leadership of Oman is Omanis. Once upon a time, they all were operators and engineers. You could imagine a company which do more than $4 billion a year is actually of revenue is actually run by young Omanis who once upon a time were technicians and operators. We have a concept called grow our own timber, and I think it's really worth that investment. And it's also given us a purpose, for example, as an Amor LNG, that we do have this particular advantage, be it the social side of it, the investment we've done in the young Omanis, the investment we've done in the community, the environmental protection program we run. It's all worth it. It's giving us that competitive advantage in the industry we were in, but also globally. For example, when we went even for insurance was a different event. Actually, when we showed them our CSR, the premium dropped down by a very reasonable percentage. And that's a link when I say it makes financial sense as well. Because if we didn't show that our sound CSR program, that discount would never get. Because that discount warranted only because we have good relationships with the community, and our that is to operate with the community we are in. It's actually beyond reserve. And for basically sustainability, as we said, even in the oil and gas, if you look into the technology, just before the lecture about the how can AI technology is really driving the whole shift. And I think the same as sustainability and sustainability related between. Even we see it for the moment, for example, although we're trying to enhance our efficiencies in the plant by look into new systems about the combustion and everything, other topic about oil and gas. That actually is saving of some, enhancing efficiencies, get out more gas, we could sell more gas, and actually we could circulate that money in a more proper way. So I think when we talk about oil and gas, we talk about social performance and social investment. To me, the social performance is it's an obligation where companies normally take on board. So when you see in a community, you are new to this community, you are hosted by this community, and how you really work with this community to guard the interests of the shareholder, the interests of the whole stakeholders, but also you become a good neighbor, a good citizen to this community. For example, I remember before my trip in Oman LNG, I was working in the industrial state. We were setting up this, and there was a village in the middle of that industrial state. So we tried to convince those to move out harm's way because that would be an industrial site and we need to. And I remember they were reluctant to move. So I talked with the sheikh there, and I just being friendly, how friendly I am always. And I said, look, sheikh, why you don't want to move? And he said, well, I have to say, no, because I'm happy and it's here. We've been here for hundreds of years. Why would I want to move out? And after the discussion, he said to me, look, the offer I get now for my families, for my members of my tribe, they will be distributed all over the town. That's a loss of control for me. They're not going to be Mr. Sheikh anymore coming in the morning and saying hello to me and in the Eid and events. It's like that. Not at this age for me. I mean, I don't want to lose this. Yeah? So that's an indirect. Actually, then that sparked a totally new solution that because also we're not driving them only from the grazing, fishing, because go to the water, the whole business they normally go to the water. But when we understood why his challenge was, it's not really, he sees the risk. He wants to move. But that little thing to him matters. As Noah said, there are little big things. For him, that little thing is big, a lot. So when we addressed that and we created a new residential complex for us as a family, they were happy to move. It's not again the move per se, it's again the disintegrated process of a family. And we call a family even a tribe as a family because we are all related somehow. So I think I think when you are facing with a challenge here and how it's not when we need the whole alignment process, the whole alignment with our stakeholders, including that process of getting. And I think this between the Hammer, always being a community liaison officer or being that interface like Muhammad has been always our interface with the community. You under so much pressure from the community, the demand, which is always a very, very genuine sort of report. They want to maximize their return on this neighborhood. And also you have a running business where you have to retain your shareholders' value as well. And how to strike that balance is where social performance comes a very handy thing. It's a well established in the industry, which I'm very much which created really a balance between what the society needs and what's the business. And how can we create that balance? And I think sustainability as a notion with CSR really came handy to say we address this request of community want to live together and they want to enjoy the wealth of this business as well. And this is basically how the whole process is creating or co-creating the shared value in the society. And how can we as a common, not only at a national but also international level, and build that in eco-infrastructure system, an ecosystem for it. But I really like what Francis Bacon said. I'm sure those who live long enough, I think he was a guy who knows more about money than I do. And I think well, British, what they call the equivalent in our system, the finance manager, the exchequer report in the UK. So he was a black person who said, don't maybe under promise but over deliver. I think what's the whole social performance about, maybe you work with the community and I think this slide basically talks about, so maybe here we are more about the oil and gas industry itself. And this slide talks about the whole process from exploration all the way to the last consumption. There's an element of relevance for the industry. And the relevance speed in the exploration, and some of you will know, because of the scarcity of the hydrocarbon now, all the easy oil, the easy gas is being extracted during time. Now, most of this hydrocarbon is available in a very different areas, be it in the Amazon, or be it in the deep seas, and other places where actually the footprint for those industries. And I would say it's actually maybe it's easier to have it onshore than have it offshore, because sometimes when offshore people could do more things than some of you have been associated with the industry. It's especially when water and using some of water and sediment goes with the water. Because drilling, for example, takes a lot of water. And if you are not careful, actually you could harm the whole ecosystem and the ecosystem. The same thing for detection. I worked in, when I was in BDO as a junior engineer, I worked in a gathering station, and always the dynamics of a gathering station is a huge. And if you're not careful, you have, and this is where I would definitely say the oil and gas, the international oil and gas companies specifically, brought a wealth of knowledge to the region, mostly to the building economies where institutions are maybe weak, or maybe the safety and health in general is not there. This is what that mindset, not because especially now is more critical than before, but because it made good sense not to harm anybody, not to harm yourself or employees or contractors or even the entire society. So that process is really critical. Transportation process, we know, could be shift. I know things much better now. I always recall one time I was student here, and there's the Valdez, if you remember, the coast of Canada, and the Alpha, and the other sort of event, which is actually called a perfect footprint. And as recent as the Deep Horizon as well, which costs a lot of harm. And so the hydrocarbon, the transportation or the shipping, I think become more safer now. It's become much easier before it used to be more. But also the pipeline protection we've seen in recent time, that could be subject to sabotage, subject to other reasons, and also subject to, so that the material is also defining against the whole thing. And I think people, they don't talk a lot about consumption. It's us who actually contribute in a big way. You could argue because we use gasoline or benzene or whatever, but eventually it's how much is our behavior, our consumption behavior, which actually sometimes causes more harm. If you drive a gasoline, some people do, I know, unfortunately, some of those countries because they don't have a good transportation system because it's just not there, right? If they're not striking, of course. So that's a system where we really feel the consumption. But also in the defining or in the detection, most of the fugitive currently gas and methane is actually in the combustion. Most of the engine currently, the gas industry, mostly in the energy industry, which is about the best is about 40 to 47% gas, the best engine available. So you could imagine 50+% gas get burned. And this is not because people would like to burn, because that's dollar being through the system, being burned out, actually because technology is limiting. And that limitation in technology currently is where most of the other things. So that creating the balance is where the challenge would be for that industry, which is now a very long value chain. So if you start from the exploration all the way, be it from the Amazon forest or all the way down to consumption somewhere in the state of Jakarta. So my hometown is Jakarta, where I come from. So, and I think this is where sometimes I call it this continuity, maybe it's advantage tackle, but I believe it's that the problem sits not with the industry, but of course, in a way, it's the gas related because of the inefficiencies in the technology currently, the combustion engine, and so on and so forth. And also that massive infrastructure, which we talked about, from exploration to water and everything else. So, but technology has evolved as we speak. So there's other things. There's also the association to calamities, which can also cause an element of this, because they can cause a bit of destruction. And I think why do we need to address it? It says for itself. What I said so far, it just makes good sense that we are inhabited in that risk. And we have a term in the industry. We have to manage risk to allow. Allow is as low as reasonably practical. There's always a limit to how far do I and how much do I spend before I have. So that's the best I could do. But that's where the allow sometimes could be. I know, for example, horizontal drilling is an innovation when it comes actually you can have one and then so it's actually short the number of rigs all over the place and so on. And also applicable in different, especially in those areas which could be endangered for something. So there are some evolvement as we proceed to minimize the footprint and also that. So there is so risk is quite huge on the ecological side, be it also social. A lot of time people talk about the ecological side, but social, and I said about the guy who didn't want to leave his village. And there's so much on the social impact because of sometimes the movement of this industry. With global warming, we know, and I think the deep horizon story is still fresh in our minds, and where the financial consequences of something going wrong is quite huge. And I think, like many other companies, we will learn that it's not affordable to have. And then, unfortunately, with the industry, we never learn in a way, because when it's priced down, you will profit on austerity, different level, but some of the consequences sometimes for that being, and actually in Oman, we have now a very stringent system for any fugitive gas, wherever that fugitive gas is well monitored and has all sort of mapped against a particular KPIs. The solutions are there as we talk about. So I'll leave them, but definitely doing the ethical, being also sustainable in our doing. It's also had that evolving with technology, investing in technological process. So Amor LNG process, I will not go more because it's similar to the oil and gas. But the process when we started as a company in '94, maybe you should press degree. It was one of the fast track projects. I will not because we could slide, but one of the areas we really proud of is our CSR program. And because we evolved so much, we created actually a separate foundation. And that's why I'm the CEO of the foundation. And that foundation actually is really where we're taking this. And I will just share some of the stories later on. The whole model of CSR in Oman is based on, and this is the true commitment made by the shareholder from inception, and this is the learning I think carried by multinational companies at the time, especially in a country where there's no law for allocation. Some countries they do have allocation like a percentage of NIAT and so on, but in Oman we didn't have. So that's a voluntary sort of commitment by the company over and above their social performance. So this is more of a social investment perspective. And we created because we are a company who cares a lot for our neighbors, but also we are with a national company, and in that sense, and we don't want just to enjoy today without thinking of the future. So we created the future generation called the reserve fund. And this is one of the success stories that we don't only spend all our money during the good days, we leave something for the bad days or the beyond. But like any other gas installators, they have a lifetime, they will end up more going away. But the legacy we want to leave behind those years, I'm not sure. Recently, luckily, we've been through negotiations with the government, we've been extended for another 10 years, of 24 to 34. So hopefully we have an extended life, but the plant is out with us for another 50 years. So this is how, and this gets a picture of what we do, an annual event we do again to capture the heritage of the small community via CPR. So I will not spend much because we talked about it, but definitely we recently revised our strategy and we tried to link to Oman Vision 2040, where those elements of well-being has been all captured in different projects we do. So that's how currently our strategy when it comes to social. Of course, we do a massive range of activities, but this is centered around environmental stewardship. So even when go and fix, for example, we work a lot of capacity with women and and most, for example, now we're converting all the women association in Oman, 30 plus, all with renewable sort of energy. And not only because we want to replace them with the solar panels, but actually to change the culture and the whole energy efficiency mindset within those sort of community. And the same thing will help being, that when I share the project, it's also, this is where an area we, as you've seen in the first slide, Sur Hospital, for example, when we landed in Sur as a company, the health facility is still a village or a town which has not. So we've done the first big hospital in that community, and that catered for our macro village when we see the slow part of it. Technology innovation, we feel the future holds into this, and the capacity among the young generation to really embrace technology. That's seen from our projects. The same with the economic growth. So this is a picture how we, over the last 23 years since our first cargo, so to date, the 94 is the establishment of the company. We went into fund, put in the construction. 2000, we had the first cargo. We are the only company, the foundation stone was laid by His Majesty, His Majesty. And again, the inauguration, he came and inaugurated, because it was the first project in Oman, which really would involve a lot of financing, a lot of process. And if it wasn't because of our association being multinational company and being trusted for what the proposition we put in before the government, we went the way we did. And if you look into, I will not go on because there's so many things, but if you look into how we, for example, in the future generation perspective, sorry, I think it doesn't go back. Okay. So in that perspective, if you look into, I'm trying to find, the pointer. Yeah, it's okay. But if you look into because I've been trying to keep to one point. The future generation fund, if you look into the top left sort of thing, 340 million. If it wasn't that future look, that money would not be there. We'll spend it on somewhere else, but we've been saving this money, and we've almost topped it by 200 million, so 140 million can grow because it's been wisely invested in a with a very good SEG sort of element to it, because we wanted to be within that boundary for the future, because it's SEG in the future, the element. So it's there for ESG. So, and if you look into all, in addition to what we give, so if you spend almost $500 million on project and on part of the investment, of course, this is something which comes out of both both taxation, both dividend, and it's being spent entirely. So from a national perspective, we've touched every single life in Oman. So almost we had 100% coverage on a different level of different stuff. On specific sort of big projects, we have recently, and I'll show the picture, something we have the press, for example, autism center here and we are blessed by the spouse of His Majesty, when she inaugurated this center just a month ago. And it was one of those iconic figures. We haven't done yet the story, but we did. Also, Oman Sail, they could remember, this is one of the projects. Sur is a maritime town, there he is. And is among the founders of the whole concept of putting something in Sur. And thank you, Nila. And your legacy remains there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the ambulances we felt at a given time was needed because road traffic accidents were huge in Oman at a given time. Luckily now, with a lot of enforcement and advocacy, become much more reasonable, but road safety was one of them. So one of those turtles from us, because we live in Sur and Rata is one of those unique sites for turtles. And our first contribution there, one of the gifts is to set up a turtle center. It's a research center. It's really something state of the art. And if you ever come to Sur or you come to the Turtle Beach there in Sur, please do visit this site because it's an incredible site. And if I refer to loyalty or anything, I would say turtles are very loyal. They hatch,
They come back.
they disappear 35 years, and they come back. I think if your son left you 35 years, very likely might not come back. I hope I haven't reached that far. But it's really they have that sense of morality, and we are very happy to have associated ourselves with it. The Ansar Hospital, as I said, is one of those first projects we did because we felt part of our being accepted by the community. We are hosting us. Let's upgrade the facility. And actually, to be honest, it's also selfish because also we need to access also target in an area where it's not. But again, shows sometimes great ideas could actually give you. It's complementing the state. We never thought we are replacing the government in anything. We're actually complementing the government. We always engage with them. What else coming in the pipeline? Can we complement this process? And that relationship we enjoy because we really created that trust and earned that respect from the. So also what we do to actually measure our success into this. I don't know. Finally, master. So, and this is what we call, I don't know if you are in finance, you will always ROI, return on investment. We also have social return on investment. This is a methodology well tested, done by third parties. So we don't do that with the third party because we want to do. And we look into the project. For example, Sur Hospital, because it's been long enough and it's been one of the happiest capital sort of invested into that. Every dollar we spend, there's $18 return from all this benefit chain of event or chain of value chain to that. It's really an incredible return on investment. The same thing with the other. So the lower the value, of course, the less attractive, but still created an impact. For example, so the Ever Hospital, we introduced people were commuting hundreds of miles away overseas to have some sort of treatment injury, because we play football, we're not good at football, a lot of football, so a lot of injuries takes place. I know I'm a person for this, but that's how it is. And also we believe in, as I said, in innovation and technology. We have almost 9 governments in Oman, where those all will introduce a lab, a science lab going back and investing in technology to introduce really kids and so on and so forth. So that again, we have a very aggressive strategy when it comes to inclusion. And that, like I said, the autism center and others, we have spent a lot of money, not only making people able, for example, like supplying wheelchairs and so on and so forth, but actually how we shift to the second phase of after mobility is actually well-being and economical values. So we take the holistic approach instead of just throw a wheelchair and make him mobile. No, we want them to make that person, he or she, we want them to make also contributing to the value of the economy. So this is just to give you a flavor of how we really work on the social benefit. So again, this is just a high level. Again, one of the strong capacity we have is our education capacity. And if you notice, even we have invested in a school in Seoul, which is a community research. We want to have the top-notch quality of learning and education using Cambridge sort of curriculum, we have a massive multinationality, and it's really one of those areas where we are very proud that we created this. On culture and environment, our project, there are more than 240 projects delivered. And if you look into the health and social, it's one of the biggest, and I think the biggest contribution also during COVID. We are the first one to step in and build financially, and also the whole value chain will be supported because of this. Once you say it's again feeling a sense of accountability towards the community we serve and so on. And I think this is the top of the project we are very proud of, that what we do, we leave a legacy, a lasting legacy, but not only for us today, but for our future generations who are going to hopefully inherit this place after us. So, and I think with that, I might come to a conclusion, but I'm open for the discussion and question whenever you feel like it. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah.
So maybe microphone, or you are vocally.
I think that's my slide. Gentleman over here, please, and then gentleman over here. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming all this way, for being such a powerful advocate. You certainly persuaded me. You talked about approaching CSR from a horizontal point of view. So could I ask you a question from a shareholder perspective? Oman currently is running a bidding process for hydrogen projects in Dhofar and slightly further to the east, which involves the allocation of large areas of land to either wind generation or solar power generation. Now, those projects are going to have massive impact on what to an outsider might look like barren desert, but actually where there are people with residual interests and continuing interests. How are you going to manage the process of keeping those people happy with what will be a massive intrusion into what currently is fairly barren land?
First of all, I cannot talk on behalf for legal purposes. So the lady behind, the legal lady, might compliment that statement for me, but I don't know. Okay, maybe it doesn't connect. But I think like you're right. If they do the social impact assessment upfront, they will understand what the likelihood of complication. As you rightly said, it is an open land, it is a barren land. Maybe there are a few settlers here and there. But I think if that settlement is being managed, first of all, because most of these are of a high level, they're not really, most of these are infrastructure which sits quite higher. And you have an experience already exists in some of the locations already, they have wind turbine and so on. And the experience so far I heard is already positive. So people managed to navigate that process and put all the mitigation in place. So in case such abnormality takes place, they already have a mitigation. We normally in the industry we use the bow tie concept basically, and somebody from the industry maybe they're better off to explain than I, but it's just that unfavorable incidents we call it. Let's get a community being resentful of whatever. And we're always trying to understand on the left side of the bow tie, what are the barriers we're going to create to prevent that incidents happening. God forbid, because we're not immune from anything. Yeah. So God forbid that something went wrong, like we see in all these crises, that something went wrong, somebody failed to do, and most of the human error somewhere in the system. And so how can we recover? How can we bring things back to normality? And we see it with stick, with contamination and so on and so on. So I think the industry, mostly the energy industry, they're quite well off in understanding the consequences they create. And normally they do a social environmental impact assessment. And I'm sure before they could put the first mask somewhere, they would have understood the consequences and they put all the necessary mitigation. Now, that would be, as I said, in the 20th as low as reasonably practicable. But unfortunately, sometimes with economics growth, there will be a compromise as long as that compromise does not really create the consequences with the future inertia hold anymore.
Thank you. So we will bring in the gentleman here, but I just want to note two things. One is Zoom participants are welcome to put questions in the chat. And we do have one already from Christopher Breeze, another trustee of the society, who also has a background in energy. And he wanted to ask another question about as low as reasonably practicable. Another tough question. He says the Stop the Oil protesters think that as low as reasonably practical should mean zero risk. What would you say to that line of argument?
And I think we have to respect the opinion of everybody, because this is how we thrive together. Unless we listen to each other and respect the opinion of each other, then we might be naive in whatever we're doing. So in every industry, there's a risk. Now that risk could be left unattended and the consequences are severe on definitely people's livelihood and so on and so forth. Or we could put all the mitigation in place to minimize that risk. And I think people have to sometimes make a compromise between economic growth, prosperity, and job creation, and so on and so forth, versus we're stuck in history and we cannot progress beyond particular. That doesn't mean people are licensed to operate in not in the manner we're supposed to be respecting social interests and social inclusion and so on and so forth. But it's always a balance a country normally need to make. I think maybe in countries where institutionals and law like Oman is well respected, such a things is already being well managed by the process of the state, so importing law enforcement. About something maybe I didn't mention in the discussion, there are definitely different type of organization. There are some who might be willing to mitigate risk by being very, let's say, defensive in a way. So they might go for the minimal compliance issue. Others who might be more proactive in engaging with community and co-creating that process of understanding. And I think community, when you engage with them, and what I'm talking about the community where the impact is most, and they see and the way that benefit interest and the wealth they're going to and the sustainability. For example, energy. We all need energy, and I think humanity, with all the growth we had recently, because of such an industry, that energy is being sustainable. Even all even the livelihood being sustainable the way it is. Even those new, like the winds and so renewable energy, it is an energy which takes time to mature. And in any maturity, it will take quite a few cycles of innovation before it reaches maturity and before one day we could say. But I think from a perspective of people seeing that balance between a humanity being looked after and the dignity of humanity being reserved to the best, is sometimes we all have to make compromises, whereby that compromise does not really harm the future generation and whatever we do today.
Thank you.
Doctor, I'm Farouk Husseini. I'm a lawyer at Three Crowns and I represent the top in some international arbitrations. Unfortunately, I have yet another legal question for you. It's quasi-legal question. As you're aware, there's lots of debate here in this country and elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the world about the human rights obligations of corporates and whether those obligations should be enshrined in legislation, whether they should be hard legal obligations or whether they should be purely voluntary. Clearly, you have a responsible company and clearly you are socially responsible and you are wary of your human rights ramifications of the human rights dimension of your activities. What do you think that it would be, as a CEO of a major Omani company, do you think it would be helpful in Oman to have legislation to clarify your duties, your obligations, and the rights of communities and the impact that you may have on them? Or do you think it would actually be helpful for it to remain purely voluntary and depend on the sort of good offices and the good judgment of corporates like you?
Thank you. I think the beauty about legal, they always taught us to go with the definition first. So I think maybe what is the definition of that human rights perspective? I think if you talk about the UN aspect of the human rights and the whole shebang of the rights, okay, maybe okay. So if you take from that perspective, I think oil and gas, at least I'm talking about my company. First, let's start. I cannot talk about the nation in a sense, but talk about my own company. When there were, I think the international perspective into an oil company brings to a host nation is more advanced, I would say, mostly about certain regulations. So let's say about, for example, we had a collective bargaining system in the company and staff union sort of thing before even Oman made compulsory or made this collective bargaining as a law. So I think that shows that the industry is aware, and basically the learning throughout the years of experience being in different contexts have brought a practice.
Some of these practices, when it comes, let's say we have the first basically HR manuals, it has a lot of details, which is actually over and above the law, which been designed for a generic perspective. So sometimes you cannot have a law per industry because different industry have a different risk associated with it. But from a perspective of the generic law, the labor law, we actually, as a company, we have more advanced with complementing and above the requirement of the law. I think when it's a country where they have to strike a balance between their growth perspective, economical growth, and so on and so forth, it's sometimes to cut short history and say somebody who has 200 years of development and growth, for somebody who's trying to find their way to uplift their quality of living, they must go maybe address it all. It's that people sometimes food and shelter would be a priority before sometimes the hierarchy of needs we go. So where you are in position perspective to what that hierarchy of needs, sometimes maybe address. So I think for any company and country wants to address, then sometimes those balance has to be maintained. How can you balance your perspective of economical growth, the respect of the human rights in all aspects, but how can that then that context, it's also have to be present in your laws, because not every law will fit every context. So I think it's all context specific.
Thank you so much. We're going to take one last question for the gentleman here.
Engineer Amor, this is Matani. I'm PhD student here in the UK. Ex-PDO staff is on the oil and gas. I have just one question. Just go back to the Stop Oil campaign, which we are seeing now more going around the world in so many countries. You have a very long supply chain from exploration, production, transportation, refining, and final consumption. And in this very long supply chain, you have a lot of interfaces, a lot of stages, a lot of people involved, and a lot of teams. So, what environmental initiatives and actions do you take in general or of the whole, not has to be for every stage? And for the future, I'm sure there will be a lot of pressure again on the environment, probably not only from these campaigns, but also from some governments, maybe, and some politicians. And how that will affect probably your cost, your final value in your value chain. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Actually, when we look into the whole value chain, there's always from initiation to the last end of the value. For example, in a company we work for, we tend to look into all those aspects. Let's say before even we look into the environmental aspect, we do the social aspect, the welfare of contractor staff all the way, not only your own direct staff, but actually your own indirect staff, because we're industry depending on a lot of support services from our value chain, as you rightly mentioned. And when it comes to an industry itself, I think there's always, and the movement, you're right, the movement is to help you accountable throughout the value chain. But if it's part of it from LNG, what Oman LNG does, as we speak, we already, when His Majesty announced the Oman pledge for 250 will be the net carbon, we went ahead, even breathe that time, and we had already planned actually to be net zero by 2035. And we always created a space, a buffer, so God forbid things might have not worked well. We actually have that buffer space created. And when we look into that, the net, we have an entire team with a department reporting to the CEO, where it looks into net zero and emission. And there's a massive technological fix, which is social fix, because sometimes you have to educate the whole system there. And we have to look into what the future holds for the investment. As I said, one of the major contributions to the methane, for example, is the conversion. And that's a technology we don't have. It's somebody else, like they are the one. And currently, there is no technology could go beyond that sort of certain efficiencies currently. So there's the technology sphere is huge there in developing solutions for that purpose. Yeah. But I agree,
the movement now, which is I personally, because I'm an environmentalist, I support that because you have to have corporate accountable. And that accountability has to come from multi-source, including the public, which unfortunately not. Maybe the shareholders might get a return on their investment, but the public could get the consequences of the failure. And we've seen it. Wherever we cannot be naive that industry does not fail. We've seen it all over the place. However, as we learn, for example, somebody could recall the case of the Texas refinery. James Baker, everybody knows James Baker from the 80s, was well known American Foreign Secretary, Foreign Secretary. So he came up with a good report for that event, called the Baker report, where it's actually articulated the process safety and how can companies take those process safety seriously. And we, for example, Amor LNG, in our KPIs, and I think Chris could assure you, because once upon a time he sits somewhere very high level in our governance structure, and those managed through a performance indicator and hitting the leadership day. They do not compromise and they do not protect that license to operate the system. So I do agree that as we progress with social media and so forth, with also Gen Z and people where they are more, and we've seen it definitely a movement, a strong movement. I think it's the right of everybody to feel safe and protected. And if any leadership in any sort of organization fail to put the evidence on the table, then people will judge you on what you present. So when I hear a company I work for, and they already have a net zero emission strategy, by 2035, they will manage to balance. For that, there's always a balance there. And already that, and determined, and young engineers and young technologists driving that because they care. Most of them are millennial or even Gen Z, some of them, they get into the system. And you see that take of ownership from the leadership committee, I think led by His Majesty himself, made a pledge, an international pledge, that he would hold this net zero by 2050, and the industry taking that seriously and putting all the strategies and mitigation there. Are we going to get it? I hope so. What might deviate us from getting it? Circumstances might be over there, but I think there's enough determination within the industry, within the political system in Oman. The highest person in the hierarchy of authority is committed. I think in Oman, they need to say we are committed to fulfill those objectives. The value chain is big, I agree. The consequences of failure is not tolerable anymore. At the moment, if you fail, then financial consequences are huge. And as well as the consequence and the future generation will be unforgivable. I don't want to be whenever I will be in heaven area. And I don't want to be cursed by somebody who felt I was a lousy leader one day.
Well, thank you so much. That's all we have time for this evening, but thanks so much for your full and thoughtful answers as well as your presentation. We hope to see you back here again soon. I just want to mention also that Oman LNG have a gift for each person who's here in person tonight that you'll find on your way out. It's very, very nice.
It's made by a capacity building program among the small SMEs, which we encourage them to in culture and the innovation in there. So it's a token appreciation to all of you for coming, but also it's linked to Omani traditional culture and values we treasure.